Hi everyone. So in this particular presentation session, we shall start with the third chapter of module 2. So far we have covered two chapters with respect to module 2. So in this particular chapter, we are going to see a special topic called as shell programming. So till now, we were executing commands individually. That means we are executing single command at a time. But suppose if you want to execute a list of commands that too regularly, a list of commands needs to be executed regularly, then the concept we need to use is shell script. So shell script is a script. It is just like program. So it is a script which contains a list of commands which have to be executed regularly. So you are going to execute those list of commands regularly. So that is called as a shell script. So we can also call our shell script as a shell program. As you can see here, a shell script can also be called as a shell program. So the user can execute the shell script. So whenever he executes the shell script, what are all the commands that are inside the shell scripts that will also get executed. So when you execute a shell script, the commands inside the shell script will also get executed. So that is how it works. So usually the shell script will run in interpretive mode. So what do you mean by interpretive mode? That means whenever you are compiling your shell script, so it will be compiled internally in memory. The entire script will be compiled internally in memory. There won't be an intermediate compiler. So whereas your high-level language such as C as well as Java will be having a intermediate compiler in order to compile your program that you have written. Whereas in a shell script, there won't be any such high-level language, any such intermediate compiler. So the shell script will be running in interpretive mode. So the entire script will be compiled internally and stored in memory. Then it will get executed. So hence we can say that our shell script will run slower than compared to the high-level programming language. So since there is no component of compiler, so it takes more amount of time to get compiled and stored directly in memory than compared to our higher level language programs. So always whenever you are writing a shell script, so you need to use an extension called as .sh. So if I'm writing a shell script, that needs to be stored with an extension called as .sh. Now we should try to understand how we can write a simple shell script in order to execute few commands. So as I had already explained, the major usage of shell script. What is the major usage of shell script? Which is to execute the commands present inside a shell. So your shell will contain many number of commands. So those commands we can execute them repeatedly or regularly. So that particular shell script should be stored with an extension .sh. Now we shall try to see how we can write a simple shell script with .sh extension. So as you can see here, so this is how you can write the shell script. So now you are using the echo command. I will explain what are all these things. So you're using three echo commands. So in the first echo command, it is printing welcome to shell programming. In the second echo command, it is printing today's date and the corresponding date. What will be the today date? That will be getting printed. So you need to enclose your date with the backquotes. Then I am printing the value of shell. Shell is a variable here. So what value that particular shell variable holds, if I need to print the value of this shell variable, then I need to use a dollar. So dollar will print the value of this particular shell variable. So as you can see here, for every line, I'm using an hash. So this hash indicates command. So hash symbol indicates the command present in the script. That means printing message, printing date, printing shell name. There are different types of shell. I'd already explained what are the different types of shells available. It can be conch shell, it can be Bourne shell. There are many different shells. So the hash symbol will be used for indicating the commands. The shell ignores all the character that follows the hash symbol. However, this won't apply to the first line. As you can see here also you're using hash, but here hash won't be treated as command. So rather, your first line indicates the path where your shell script is available. That means your shell script is available in the path root, bin folder, and sh folder. Inside sh, there is a file by name program1.sh. So program1.sh ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಫೈಲು ಆ particular path ಒಳಗೆ ಸ್ಟೋರ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. So that indicates the path. So now we have written our shell script. Now we want to execute our shell script. How we can execute our shell script? Usually there are two ways available in order to execute your shell script. We shall try to see both the ways in detail, both these ways in detail. The first is to execute your shell script just by using a file name. So initially your shell, whatever the shell program you are writing or shell script you are writing, it won't be executable. It won't be in a executable format. That means first we need to add the executable permission to our shell script. So if you want to add the executable permission to your shell script, the command you need to use is chmod command. So I'm using the chmod command that is used to make the script to become executable. So the scripts will be executed in a separate child shell process. Since you are executing a shell script here, we will be choosing one shell process. That child shell process will execute this particular script. That's what. Whenever you are executing a command, that command will be interpreted by your shell. Then it will be passed on to the Unix kernel or Unix operating system. But now you are executing the shell script itself. In such a case, the scripts will be executed by a separate shell process. The scripts will be executed by a separate shell process. So that is what has been stated. Excuse me, just a second. So your scripts are executed in a separate shell process. You are using the chmod command, which is used to make the script executable. The child shell reads and executes each statement in interpretive mode. That means first you need to add executable permission. X is the letter which we need to use in order to add executable permission for this particular file. So we are adding the executable permission. Once the executable permission has been added, you can execute your program1.sh ಅಂತ execute ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ it will print the output. Welcome to shell programming. This was the message we wrote there. Then today's date, the date will be printed. Then where the path where this particular shell program is stored, that will be printed, as you can see. So there is one more way in order to execute your shell script. That second way we can see, you can execute shell script by specifying the interpreter. That means instead of making the shell script to become executable, we are making use of the interpreter to directly execute our shell script. As you can see here, I am making use of the shell interpreter itself. So shell interpreter na use ಮಾಡಿ direct ಆಗಿ ನಾನು program na execute ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. The user can also execute a shell script by specifying the interpreter in the command line. Here the script neither requires executable permission nor an interpreter line. So here there is no need to add executable permission. You can directly make use of the shell interpreter in order to execute your program. So when I execute this, you are executing your sh interpreter. Then you can also execute using bash. Bash is also a shell interpreter. It is a type of shell interpreter. So here general agi now execute ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ with the help of shell. Specific agi, if you know the shell, what is the shell you are using andre, you can make use of bash. So output ali will get welcome to shell programming today's step. The same output what you got in the previous method. So these are the two ways in which you can execute your shell script. The first way is you need to make your shell script to become executable, then you can execute. The second is you can directly execute the shell script by specifying the interpreter. Here we were using the general interpreter. Later we are using the specific interpreter called as bash. So next we shall see, in shell script we can make use of two types of variables. The first one is ordinary variable and the second one is environmental variable. Now we shall try to understand what do you mean by an ordinary variable and what do you mean by an environmental variable. So shell variables will be mainly of two types, environment and ordinary variable. So environment variable are those variables which provide information to the programs you use. That means you won't be using these variables directly in the program. Rather, these variables provide some support for your programs to be written and get executed. So these provide information to the programs you use. These variables control the behavior of the system. That means what is the shell program you are writing, that behavior and the entire behavior of the system will be controlled by these environmental variables, environment variables. So they determine the environment in which the user works. So we are having many different environment variables. So when we go through those environment variables, you will get a clear understanding what actually do you mean by environmental variables. So they determine in environment in which user ಯಾವ environmental work ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೇನೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಈ environmental variable decide ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ based on how you are setting those environmental variables. So if environment variables are not set properly, the user may not be able to use some commands. So it is must to set all your environment variables in a proper way. So if you are not setting your environment variables in a proper way, then it might become difficult for the user to execute some of the commands. So environment variable are so called because they are available in the user's total environment. That means user ಏನೆಲ್ಲ environment use ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ, in the entire environment all these environment variables will be available. That is the subshells that run shell script and mail commands. As we saw here, we use the subshells in order to execute our shell script. So ಎಲ್ಲದಕ್ಕೂನು we need environment variable. So without those environment variable you cannot execute a shell script. So that environment variable is must. So this environment variable, some of them will be set by the system. System ಕೆಲವು environment variable set ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. Others will be set by the users and some of them will be set by the shell program. ನೀವು shell script ಏನು ಬರೀತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ಅದು ಸಹ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು environment variable ನ set ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. So if you want to know the details of what environment variable contains, you can make use of a command called as env. This is the command you can use in order to display all your environment variables. So as you can see here, so it has displayed all my environment variables. So now we shall go through each of these environmental in a greater detail here. So the first environmental variable is home. So as you might guess here, home, it indicates the home directory of the current user. Current directory, current user ಯಾವ particular directory place ಆಗಿದಾನೆ ಅದರದ್ದು path ನ list ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. So current user has been placed in home, user name Kumar. So ಈ particular directory set ಆಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಇದನ್ನ ಯಾರು ಸೆಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ, ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಅಡ್ಮಿನ್. ಈಗ ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ಯೂಸರ್ ಲಾಗಿನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ದ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಅಡ್ಮಿನ್ ವಿಲ್ ಪ್ರೊವೈಡ್ ದಿಸ್ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟರಿ ಫಾರ್ ದ ನ್ಯೂ ಯೂಸರ್ ಹೂ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಲಾಗ್ಡ್ ಇನ್. ಸೊ ಐಎಫ್ಎಸ್ ಏನ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ದಿಸ್ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ಕಂಟೈನ್ಸ್ ಎ ಸ್ಟ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಆಫ್ ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ as you can see that are used as a word separator in the command line. So if there are many words, if you want to separate those two words, you can make use of this particular string. So this string normally consists of space, tab and new line. Here we are using a space, it can be tab or it can be new line. Mainly it will be used in order to separate the words, word separator in a command line. So command use ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ word ನ separate ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಕೆ you can make use of IFS. Log name, so variable name, user name ತೋರಿಸುತ್ತೆ. So Kumar, in this particular case it is Kumar. So Kumar ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸುತ್ತೆ. So next mail. ಸೊ ಯೂಸರ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಮೇಲ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಯೂಶಲ್ ಆಗಿ ನಿಮ್ದು ಜಿಮೇಲ್ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಡಿಫಾಲ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಇನ್ ಯುನಿಕ್ಸ್ ಆಪರೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ದೇರ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಎ ಮೇಲ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಆ ಮೇಲ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ನ ತೋರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಮೇಲ್ ಚೆಕ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು, ಯೂಶಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಇಷ್ಟು ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಗಿ ನಂಗೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಮೇಲ್ ಬಂದಿದೋ ಇಲ್ವೋ ಅಂತ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡು ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ನ ಸೆಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. So after every 60 seconds, it is asking to go and check whether there is a mail available or not. ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಮೇಲ್ ಬಂದಿದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅಂತ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರುತ್ತೆ after every 60 seconds. So next to path. So path ಏನು ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, this variable specifies the location in which the shell should look for commands. So ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಒಂದು ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ನ ನೀವು ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಲೊಕೇಶನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ. ಸೊ ನೀವು ಪಾತ್ ಸ್ಪೆಸಿಫೈ ಮಾಡ್ದೇನೆ ಇಫ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಗಿವಿಂಗ್ ದ ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ನೇಮ್, ದೆನ್ ಯುವರ್ ಶೆಲ್ ಅಲ್ವಾ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ನ ಇಂಟರ್ಪ್ರೆಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಕರ್ನಲ್, ಯೂನಿಕ್ಸ್ ಕರ್ನಲ್ ಗೆ ಪಾಸ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಯಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಪಾತ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ನ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ, ಸೊ ದೋಸ್ ಪಾತ್ಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಲಿಸ್ಟೆಡ್. ಸೊ ಬಿನ್ನು, ಯೂಸರ್ ಬಿನ್ನು, ಈ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಪಾತ್ ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಯುವರ್ ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಸರ್ಚ್. ಸೊ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ What is PS1 and PS2? Shell usually has two prompts. Shell usually has two. So far, we have seen only one prompt, that is the dollar prompt, is the one the user normally sees on the monitor. So that will be stored in PS1 environment variable. However, the user can change this particular prompt. How he can change? So ಈ ತರ change ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. $PS1 ಅಂತ ಕೊಟ್ಟು C ಅಂತ ಕೊಟ್ಟಾಗ, so you won't be getting the dollar prompt. Instead, you will be receiving this C greater than prompt ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. So ಈ prompt ಅಲ್ಲಿ you can keep on executing the command. So PS2 ಅಂತ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ಇದೆ. In that particular variable, the secondary prompt, so greater than symbol ಏನಿದೆ, that will be stored. So as you can see here, PS1 ಅಲ್ಲಿ dollar ಇದೆ, PS2 ಅಲ್ಲಿ greater than ಇದೆ. However, you can change the environment variable, that is PS1, ಈ dollar ಏನಿದೆ, that you can change. So that you can change. So as we saw here, we change that particular dollar to C greater than ಅಂತ change ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ವಿ. Shell. So this variable specifies the current shell. ಯಾವ shell ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ ಯೂಸರು ಅದನ್ನ ಸ್ಪೆಸಿಫೈ ಮಾಡಿ. There are different types of shell. So ಬಾನ್ ಶೆಲ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಸಿ ಶೆಲ್, ಕಾನ್ ಶೆಲ್. ಸೊ ಅದ್ರದ್ದು ಕರೆಸ್ಪಾಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಪಾತ್ ಗಳನ್ನು ಲಿಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. As you can see here, ಬಿನ್ ಪಾತ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಶೆಲ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಬಿನ್ ನೋಡಿ. ಸೊ ಬಾನ್ ಶೆಲ್ಗೆ SH, ಸಿ ಶೆಲ್ಗೆ CSH, ಕಾನ್ ಶೆಲ್ಗೆ KSH. ಟರ್ಮ್ ಏನು ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ? Terminal type. There are different terminal types. So when you want to execute some commands, you need to first go into the terminal. Inside the terminal only you can execute commands. So there are different terminal types. ಆ terminal type ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ terminal ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀರಾ ಅಂತ ಸೆಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದು. ಸೊ ನೀವು ಟರ್ಮಿನಲ್ ನ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಸೆಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ VI ಅಂತ VI ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ಏನಿದೆ, VI ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಎಡಿಟರ್. ಸೊ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ವರ್ಡ್ ಪ್ಯಾಡ್, ನೋಟ್ ಪ್ಯಾಡ್ ಎಡಿಟರ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ VI ಎಡಿಟರ್ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಟರ್ಮಿನಲ್ ನ ಸೆಟ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಲ್ಲ. As you can see here, ಈಗ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ಯಾಶ್ ಶೆಲ್ ಇದೆ, ಟರ್ಮಿನಲ್ ನ TTY1 ಅಂತ ಸೆಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಸೊ TTY1 is a type of terminal where you can successfully execute your VI command. VI command na without any faults I can execute. So we shall try to see what do you mean by ordinary variable. So ordinary variable you might already be knowing. If you are familiar with any programming language, you will know what is an ordinary variable. So variable is nothing but a character string to which the user assigns a value. So this is a character string. This is a string for which user is assigning a value. The value can be which you can assign. It can be a number, it can be text, file name, device, or any type of data you can assign to a variable. The value of variable are usually stored in ASCII format, that you know. So for example, for this particular variable called as x, I am storing a value called as 50. So adna display ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ echo $x ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ it will display the value 50. As you can see here, it is displaying the value 50. So in command line, all words that are preceded by values na ಕೊಡುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾವುದೇ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ಮುಂಚೆ $, ಕೊಟ್ರೆ that will give me value. So and also you can make sure you can make your variable to become read only. Constant ಅಂತ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ವಲ್ಲ ನಾವು, ಆ ತರ read only ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. So read only ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನರ್ಥ? So you cannot change the value of this particular variable called as size because it is a read only variable. So usually the variable exists only for that particular block. ಅದನ್ನೇ ಹೇಳೋದು ಶಾರ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಏನ್ ಶೆಲ್ ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ. So this local variables will be to restricted to the user shell environment. ಬೇರೆ ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಗಳು, ಬೇರೆ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ಗಳು ಈ ಲೋಕಲ್ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ನ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಯೂಸರ್ ಡಿಫೈನ್ಡ್ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರೀತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಯೂಸಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಲೋಕಲ್ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್. ಲೆಟ್ ಸಿ ಹೌ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಅವರ್ ಲೋಕಲ್ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ಸ್. ವೇರ್ ಆಲ್ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಅವರ್ ಲೋಕಲ್ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಆಸ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಸಿ ಹಿಯರ್, ಫಾರ್ ಸೆಟ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಪಾತ್ ನೇಮ್. ಸೊ ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಈಗ ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಪಾತ್ ನ ಇಫ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಯೂಸಿಂಗ್ ದಟ್ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಪಾತ್ ಸೆವರಲ್ ಟೈಮ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಎ ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್, ಐ ಆಮ್ ರೈಟಿಂಗ್ ಎ ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಏನ್ ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೇನೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ. ಸೊ ಈ ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ ಒಳಗೆ ಒಂದು ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಪಾತ್ ನ ಸೆವರಲ್ ಟೈಮ್ಸ್ ಬರೀತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್. ಸೊ ಇನ್ಸೈಡ್ ದಿಸ್ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ರೈಟಿಂಗ್ ಎ ಪಾತ್ ಸೆವರಲ್ ಟೈಮ್ಸ್. ಇನ್ ಸಚ್ ಎ ಕೇಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಐ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಡೂ, I can assign that particular path to a variable. So ಆ path ನ ಒಂದು ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ಗೆ ಅಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ. So instead of using that particular path again and again, I can make use of that particular variable. So that is one usage. So using commands substitution, we can assign the result. So ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಒಂದು ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಆ ರಿಸಲ್ಟ್ ನ we can assign it to one more variable. So and also you can use concatenate variables and string. As you can see here, ಈ ಬೇಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ಗೆ foo ಅಂತ ಅಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಇದೆ, ಈ ಸ್ಟ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಗೆ ನಾನು .c ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. Now I am concatenating both of them. ಬೇಸ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ext ನ concatenate ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. So if I concatenate, it will become foo.c. So foo.c ಅಂತ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಫೈಲ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ನ ನಾನು ಎಕೋ ಮಾಡಿ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ as you can see foo.c ಪ್ರಿಂಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So these are the some of the usages of your local variable. So we saw what do you mean by environment variable. So and also we saw what do you mean by local ordinary variable or local variable. So we saw shell script, how we can execute shell script, what are the two different ways to execute your shell script. We saw both those things. So next we shall try to see what is dot profile. So dot profile and actually it is a startup file. So if whenever a Unix operating system is getting started up for a particular user, that profile will contain all the information pertaining to that user. So that needs to get booted up. So ಆ file booted ಆದಾಗ ಆ user ಗೆ ಏನೆಲ್ಲ settings ಗಳು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತಾನೆ that will be set up for the Unix operating system. So as soon as the user logs in, this file gets executed. So it will be present in the home directory of each user. The system provides each user with a profile with a minimum working environment. So as I already said, different users will be having different profile. However, the user can customize the profile. User on ಹೆಂಗ್ ಬೇಕು ಆ ರೀತಿ ಕಸ್ಟಮೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. ಸೂಟಬಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ನ ಎನ್ವೈರನ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ಗೆ ಅಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. ಪ್ರೊಫೈಲ್ ಫೈಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ನ ಮಾಡಿಫೈ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಅಥವಾ ಆಡ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. So this is these are all the things the user can do with respect to profile file. So this file can be any of the two. So a specific file for each individual user with responsibility for the user environment. So that means you can give one single file for each of the user. Each of the user can use one single file, or you can give a universal file for all the users. ಎಲ್ಲ ಯೂಸರ್ಗೂ ಒಂದು universal file ಕೊಡ್ಬೋದು. So avaga they will be getting general environment. So suppose if you are giving a separate file for each of the user, then each of the user will be getting different settings or different environment. Or you can write an universal file which can be given for all the users. So all the users, ಎಲ್ಲ users ಗೂ ಅದನ್ನ provide ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. So user can view his dot profile. So dot profile details ಏನಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲನೂ user view ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. As you can see on the mailbox. So path ಒಂದು ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಯಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಪಾತ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಸೊ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಂಪ್ಟ್ ಯಾವುದು, ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಕಮಾಂಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಂಪ್ಟ್ ಯಾವುದು, ಶೆಲ್ ಯಾವ ಪಾತ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟೋರ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಯಾವ ಟರ್ಮಿನಲ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ, ಅಷ್ಟು ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಡಿಸ್ಪ್ಲೇ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So we shall stop here. So in this particular presentation session, we covered many concepts actually. So we started with shell programming. So just like you do programming in any higher level language, you can also do programming in Unix with the help of shell. So in shell script, you can start writing programs. So that need to be ended with .sh extension. So we wrote a simple program. So here, so this shell script can be executed in two ways. We saw which are those two ways. First, you need to make that particular shell script to become executable using the chmod command. Then you can execute shell script, or you can execute a shell script by directly specifying the interpreter, that is sh or bash. It is a type of shell. Then we saw what do you mean by environmental variable. Later we saw what do you mean by local variable. Lastly, we saw the dot profile file, which can be unique for individual user, or it can be universal for all the users. So we shall wind up at this particular point. So in our next presentation session, we shall start with read and read only command. So thank you. If you get any doubts, you can ping me with respect to your doubts. Thank you.